Good afternoon, Year 5. Welcome to this week's Humanities lesson. It's lovely to see you all. First of all, let's get on with this week's shout out. And this week's shout out goes to Anastasia, Yumindi, Mario, Evelina, Anushanth, Reese, Grace, and Munir. Well done for all the work that you've sent in this week. Thank you. Okay, so let's see what equipment we need this week. And we need our writing book, our pen, our pencil, and some coloured pencils because you are going to be needing them for the task later on. So today's date is Monday, the 22nd of June, 2020, and your learning intention is to identify the cultural offerings of New York City and Washington, D.C. So if you're not quite sure what that means, it means everything that New York City and Washington, D.C. has to offer, like all the theatres, the monuments, all the important places and beautiful scenery that you can think of. So your success criteria today is going to be I am able to identify cultural attractions in New York City and Washington, D.C. So that'll all come clear in your task later on. We're going to be continuing our journey from New England to New York City. We have looked at New York City a few weeks ago, but today we're going to have a look a little bit more in depth. New York City is in the mid-Atlantic region of the United States. The region is located near the middle of the Atlantic coastline. It includes the 5 states, which we already know are New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, and the city of Washington, D.C., which is the capital of the United States. So if you look at the maps here, you can see whereabouts New York City is stated. So let's have a look at the Mid-Atlantic region. So you can see on the map there, I've highlighted it out for you. So there are many port cities in the Mid-Atlantic region. So 2 of these port cities, Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, and Trenton, New Jersey, are located on the Delaware River. Have a look and see if you can see it. If not, you might like to Google it so you can get a bit of a close-up. So New York City, as you may recall from before, is the most populated city in America and one of the most populated cities on earth. So it is made up of the 5 areas called boroughs. So what do we know about the boroughs? They are Manhattan, the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island. And Manhattan is the most densely populated borough. Oh, well, one of the first things that you notice when you get into Manhattan are the tall buildings or skyscrapers. So there are so many skyscrapers packed so closely together that when you walk between them, you can hardly see the sky itself. So in the 1800s, a large wave of people came to live in New York City. So these were called immigrants, and they came from countries all around the world. Many moved to New York City because they were looking for a better way of life. So since the country's beginnings, people have come from far, far away places to make their homes in America. So underneath, I've got a little bit of vocab for you. So an immigrant is a person from one country who moves to another country to live. And as you can see, there's a couple of pictures from the 1800s. One is of Central Park in 1862. Look how different it is. And the other one is of the Bronx in 1898. Wow. For many immigrants, the first thing they saw when they sailed into New York Harbor was a giant metal statue called the Statue of Liberty. I know a lot of you are quite familiar with this statue. This is in the shape of a woman holding up a torch. It is supposed to stand for the freedom that Americans enjoy. To really appreciate New York City, you have to look up. You can catch a ferry boat out up to the statue and walk up inside it. By the time you get to the top, you will have climbed 354 steps. So let's have a look at the climate in New York. So we've found out, for example, that the area has a climate pretty much like New England, if you remember that from last week. However, in New York, the summers are hotter and the winters are not quite so cold. You can see it there on the graph above. So let's have a quick recap before we carry on. So you might want to make some notes as we go along because you're going to need them for your task later on. But don't worry if you haven't, you can always go back through the video. So New York City is in the mid-Atlantic region of the United States. This region is located near the middle of the Atlantic coastline and includes the 5 states, so we know what they are: New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, and the city of Washington, D.C., which is the capital of the United States, so we know that already. There are many ports in the mid-Atlantic region. 2 of these ports, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Trenton in New Jersey, are located on the Delaware River. New York City is the most populated city in America and one of the most populated cities on earth. The United States is a country of immigrants. A large wave of people came to live in New York City in the 1800s, and they moved there because they were looking for a better way of life. And the first thing they saw when they sailed into New York Harbor was the gigantic metal statue of the Statue of Liberty. So, and the Statue of Liberty stands for the freedom that Americans enjoy. And we know that the climate is pretty much like New England's. However, the summers are hotter and the winters are not quite so cold. So that's a quick recap. Let's move on. Things to do in New York City. So when the immigrants moved to New York City, they brought along the different kinds of food they ate back home. That means that you can get almost any kind of earth food imaginable when visiting the city. So in the area called Chinatown, you can eat crispy snacks called egg rolls, which is on the top picture on the right. In Little Italy, you can sample sweet treats called cannoli, and that's the middle picture, and they look delicious. Or treat yourself to a Polish hot dog called kielbasa from the hot dog stand. But there's way much more to do in New York than eat. Lots more. So New York City is full of cultural attractions. So we have concert halls, theatres, museums. In Manhattan, there is Broadway, which is famous for its theatres where you can watch different musicals and plays. Then we have the Metropolitan Museum of Art, that's also in Manhattan. And there you can see some of the most famous art ever made. It, if you're interested in plants and animals, there's always the Museum of Natural History, just like the one we have in London. So both of these museums are located near a large space called Central Park. And the park also has lakes, fields, a theatre, a zoo, and other places for people to gather and enjoy. So this photograph here is the New York Public Library, and it's a really grand building that stands in the heart of the city. So it is also guarded by 2 stone lions, and it's a really impressive building if you've ever been there. So we're going to have a look at exploring the capital. So the headquarters of the national government is in a place called Washington, D.C., located in the southern part of the region. So Washington, D.C. is the only American city that is not in a state. It is the capital of the entire country. So that means it cannot be part of any state, any one state, because the state would hold too much power. So the city is its own district or area, the District of Columbia. That is why Washington is referred to Washington, D.C. Using D.C. also stops people from confusing Washington state with the city of Washington. So on the way to Washington, D.C., you can fly over some other interesting cities in the area. In Pennsylvania, you fly over Philadelphia. In Maryland, you can fly over Baltimore. You also fly over a body of water called Chesapeake Bay, which is covered with hundreds of small fishing boats. So wonderful seafood comes from this bay. Chesapeake Bay is especially famous for its crabs, which are supposed to be a bit like lobsters but smaller and rounder. So we've got another little bit of vocab here. So bay is a part of a sea or ocean that extends into land. The city of Washington, D.C. has wide, straight streets called avenues. There are a lot of grand buildings where the people who run the government work. Maybe the grandest building is the US Capitol with its large white dome, as you can see in the picture. This is where Congress makes American laws. So Congress is made up of elected lawmakers from every state. So with more vocab, so Congress, the law-making branch of the American government that is made up of the House of Representatives and the Senate. So if we go to the west of the Capitol, there is a long grassy area called the National Mall. This is a place where Americans gather for different kinds of celebrations. So right in the middle of the National Mall is a huge stone obelisk more than 500 feet tall. An obelisk is a four-sided shaft that narrows to a pyramid-like point. This one is called the Washington Mount. It was built in honor of America's first president, George Washington. So at the far end of the National Mall is the Lincoln Memorial. This structure honors another great American president, Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln was president during the 1860s. Inside the memorial is a very large statue of Lincoln, 3 or 4 times the size of a real human being. He's seated in a chair and looks very serious and commanding. The Near the National Mall is the house where today's president lives, so that's Donald Trump. The elegant White House has tall pillars in front of the door. Americans call the president's home the White House. So the National Mall in Washington, D.C. is lined with famous attractions and historical buildings. The Capitol is located at one end of the mall. If you look uh, and see where I've said the capital is located, it doesn't mean the capital of the city. The capital is a building. So after all that information soaking into your brain, your task for today is to create a travel brochure for someone visiting New York City and Washington, D.C. So remember to include all the many cultural attractions and important government buildings, monuments, and the National Mall. So everything that you need for your brochure is in the video. Use illustrations to make you interested, make somebody want to read it. And for those of you that like a challenge, which I know you are out there, Choose one of these words and write a sentence using the word or phrase. So the words are immigrant, Congress, bay, or the phrase densely populated. So just write a sentence as a challenge. And when you've done all that, send all your completed work to year5@grange.harrow.school.uk. Make sure you put for Mrs. Hubbard in case I don't get it. Okay, so year 5, thank you very much for taking part in this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. I really look forward to seeing all your work next week. So well done and bye for now.